I start, I teach this stuff. I have a course. I have a group mentoring coaching program. And one of the first questions is I ask them three questions. What problem do you solve? Who do you solve it for? And how do you solve it? If you can't answer those three questions, you got to figure that out, which means you got to find a problem that somebody has.
My guest today is Joe DiChiara, an entrepreneur CPA who has worked with thousands of business owners over a 35-year career. Eager to help people succeed, it troubled him that most new businesses fail and was determined to find out why. In 2010, he got his answer. He realized that success starts with mindset and intention, subjects that they don't teach in accounting. Joe learned that this was the true culprit in business failure, on top of an overly complex tax and compliance system, making it nearly impossible to start a business and stay in business. He's made it his primary purpose to teach entrepreneurs the fundamental principles of success, along with the practical knowledge of accounting. He's here to tell us the top reasons why businesses fail. So welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you. And I'm going to tell you the top reasons I believe they fail, if that's okay.
Oh, that's why you're here, Joe. You know, what in
Okay.
your experience you've seen as being those reasons. I mean, there are listeners, there may be some people out there that have either started businesses or are thinking about it. And your advice on the pitfalls to avoid can make it more likely that they'll succeed, that they set off on that path. Or if they've already started on it, prevent them from failing.
So if they're like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so that's what I wanted to talk to you about, and you can help our listeners out there to avoid those pitfalls.
That's what I hope and pray for. But if they're anything like me, it's going to go in one ear and out the other until they hear it about 100 times, and they've gone through all the pain and suffering, and then for some reason they're like, I know I heard that, but I just like stuff your mother told you growing up.
Mm-hmm.
All of us. I'm 61. I'm like, Ma, you were right about that. It's and it keeps happening. That's what keeps me going. I keep finding out these secrets that weren't really secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And can I be transparent?
Please do.
So part of my intro, and I wrote that a couple of years ago, but it still works.
Mm-hmm.
But I was interested in my own success. I mean, in the intro that, they told me, and what I learned from marketing, they don't care. People don't care about me. They care about themselves.
That's right.
So the truth is, I was perplexed about, I'm like, I'm doing everything I learned in CPA school. Okay. I went to college. And, like I said, I'm an entrepreneur that just happens to have a CPA license. And that's the truth, because my father tricked me into it. I was born to be, and I had a casino in my driveway when I was 10 years old. And that's a whole nother story. I think I put that in my new bio. But yeah, my parents closed me down. I was like, oh my God. And I remember before I did that, because we had thrown a carnival the week before, and we raised like $200 for muscular dystrophy. And my friend's father had a trucking business. We actually raised 100, and he doubled it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, why do people work? I was 10 years old. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It's like, why do people work when you could just make money and have fun?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
absolutely.
That's what, I mentioned to you before, that we're delusional. As I was delusional as a 10-year-old. I thought it was always going to be that easy. Right?
Yeah.
So that's, being transparent. And then when I started, we go through phases. I'm sure, you told me you're an attorney. At some point you said, you know what? I want to have a podcast. Or a business. Most attorneys don't do that. They just they're attorneys, and I didn't just want to be an accountant. I wanted to change the world, but I also wanted to own businesses. Not one, not I wanted to be like Warren Buffett.
There you go.
Not president, because they didn't pay enough. I didn't know about the I didn't know that you make money by writing, until I was like, oh, they forgot, they left that out. But that was always my goal. So when I read two things, The Science of Getting Rich, which told me, you know what, it's not about the numbers. You got to like step out of that and look at all the abundance and opportunities that are out there. And you stop competing. There's only competition in your head. If you want to compete with people, then it's about, price and that. Anyway, it was like, wow, that's a whole, nobody ever told me that.
Mm-hmm.
But then thinking back, I read about that when I was 20. My father gave me Think and Grow Rich.
Oh yes,
And
Napoleon Hill.
I think I read the title, and that was it. I was like, that's it. You just think and grow. And then I did after, and I'm only saying this because it's my story, and it changed everything for me. But just reading stuff that was free, it was free. Okay, it's out there in the public domain. The Law of Success, that was Napoleon Hill's first. It was actually a course, and I took it with my friend, my best friend, and my son. We did it like a course. And I remember looking up, I said, I want to teach this to people. Because, and not realizing that I didn't really know it. So I had to apply it, and I've learned a lot. So what happened was I said, oh, I can still be an accountant and be an entrepreneur and do everything I wanted to do. So now what I do is I try to teach people what I learned after working with thousands and thousands of different kinds of small businesses. And seeing, the pain firsthand and experiencing it myself. Like I said, I'm an entrepreneur. I made all the expensive lessons myself. So you had asked me a question, and I've been talking about my bio, I guess, but didn't you ask me, like, we were going to talk about the top reasons why people go out of business?
Yeah, why businesses fail. Exactly. And so the listeners can get an idea. So let's step through some of them. First off, what's the first one on your list as far as reasons businesses fail?
I love the quote you told me about. I forgot his name, but they
John Paul Mendoza. Yes.
They fail and you could tell them that I'm quoting this. They fail in the first 5 minutes, but they don't realize it for like 3 or 4 years, right? And that's the truth. And that's what I found out. We suffer. I bought my clients' car radio business, car stereo shop, because I used to put my own radios in my car, and I like music. That took about 9 months of pain and $50,000 later. But what I wanted to know when I started reading those, but after I read the song, and it was simple. And if people don't know what that is, that's the book that they used to create The Secret, the movie The Secret. So now you have a CPA entrepreneur that's following the laws of attraction. I don't know how many of us are out there, but if you are, ping me. So I wanted to know, like, I've been struggling. I see all these clients, and I'm like, I know my numbers, isn't that what they tell you to do? And so I had to go backwards. What did I do? Because there's always a cycle. That's the funny thing. You keep doing the same thing over. I'm like, every time I did a business, I made the same decisions and wound up in the same place. So where did I make and it was the first 5 minutes.
When the idea first occurs to you.
I didn't look at myself, and I call it inventory. I didn't know myself. I didn't know my limitations. I didn't know my strengths.
Mhm.
I thought up till that point, you find your weaknesses and work on them. No, now I find out, no, find your strengths and get other people to handle the other stuff. So
Right.
my thinking was all backwards. I'm like, it's not about the number. Yeah, the numbers are important. I'm an accountant. Like, but what, who am I? And that takes years.
Mhm.
So, and I'm still finding out, but at least putting the effort in. It's like, every time I just go out and put things on my credit card, I overspend.
Mhm.
I'm like a gambler. I'm like, that's not an accountant. What would my accountant tell me?
Mhm. Well,
So I
the
stopped
John Paul
wasting.
Mendoza's book talks about, most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. What he mainly it talks about in the book is something called positioning. And I mean, we talked before we started recording about, what is positioning? Well, where are you standing right now? But what Mendoza means about positioning is, all right, you have this idea for a business. Is there a market for it? If there is a market for it, or a lot of other people doing it, if a lot of other people are doing it, why should they do business with you? How do you fit into that market? How do you position yourself? What is your unique sales proposition to that potential customer that would get them to do business with you as opposed to someone else? Would you say that a failure to think about positioning would be one of the main reasons why businesses fail?
No, I think that people think about positioning because they're told to, like like if they hire a marketing coach, they're going to say, "Hey, what's your message?"
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to go deep. You could go really deep, like who's your avatar? What do they like? Where do they
Mm-hmm.
live? What color lips? And I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I one of my friends has this program called ACT. It's based on the advertising model. And if I did it the way he told me to do it, I would have learned it all in 6 months, but I took shortcuts. But
Mm-hmm.
a part of it was defining your avatar. Who do you like doing business with? And you know what I did? I analyzed myself to death. And he was laughing at me. It's like, you don't have to know your avatar's lipstick color. Like, but
Yeah, you can really get into the weeds on that and
so
overanalyze it.
and so it was all about positioning. And when you mentioned that to me, I'm like, the truth is we're always positioning ourselves because
Mm-hmm.
business is fluid, it changes, technology changes, our ideas change.
Mm-hmm.
You have a great team member, they decide to retire, which is what my mother did. And it throws you off course, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to ask me when you start out, you gotta, you know, you gotta see where, like I said, where are your socks right now? Where are your feet planted?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, what's your money situation? Do you have a full-time job that you can do, and you can do this on the side and
Mm-hmm.
experiment? What do you know about this business? Why do you think somebody's going to want it? Because that's one of the biggest, and that might be the second biggest mistake. It's hard to rate them
Mm-hmm.
because one thing that I always did, I was like, oh my God, people are going to love this. And they had no interest in it.
Uh-huh.
And then they loved things like, remember the pet rock?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is wrong with people? There's nothing, well, there's a lot wrong with us, but what makes us buy is really the key. I couldn't sell my accounting services because I'm a great bookkeeper, because I know what Section 179 is.
Mm-hmm.
People don't care. I was always able to get clients because I put people at ease. So, when I say positioning, you gotta put the homework in. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, there's no way around it. You got to put a good 2 to 3 years into researching your
Mm-hmm.
business without spending a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And entrepreneurs are impatient. They don't, the last thing they want to hear is that this is going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the truth. I've learned it the hard way, and I've learned it from seeing people do
Mm-hmm.
it. Also, and I'll just add one other thing. I started studying successful people.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Steve Jobs,
Mm-hmm.
Elon. these guys didn't just wake up and were brilliant and great. They worked. They worked. And entrepreneurs are like, I'll hire somebody. You can't buy it. You can't buy success.
Well, it's interesting that we talk about, what's your market? Are people going to buy this? But you don't, that isn't even necessarily a key to success. I mean, the famous Henry Ford quote, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. So, you don't, and Steve Jobs, you mentioned him. He's an example of somebody that said, no, I'm going to tell you what you want. This is what you want. You just don't know it yet. So,
well, the truth is, people, I'm sorry to stop you, but I know people don't know what they want. I think he was like, I know that you want this because this is what I want. I want a computer that's cool.
Right. But he had, an instinct to it. I mean, that's something that isn't necessarily learned, but just to say, yes, you should know your market, your positioning, but that isn't always the case. If you see something that is new and is a product you think people will buy, it may not be the product itself. It may be the problems that product or service solves. So your research becomes not do they want this product or service, but do they want the solution to a particular problem or need? And maybe that's where your research starts.
I start, I teach this stuff. I have a course. I have a group mentoring, coaching program. And one of the first questions is I ask them 3 questions. What problem do you solve? Who do you solve it for? And how do you solve it? If you can't answer those 3 questions, you got to figure that out, which means you got to find a problem that somebody has.
Exactly. And that's a great, folks listening, rewind and write that down, those 3 questions, and if you're sitting there in the coffee shop and coming up with a great idea, write it down on the napkin. Write those questions down, and more importantly, write the answers, and don't start spending any money until you have some good answers to those questions. And as you say, it may take some time to get those answers. So if you don't know right away, don't give up, but just concentrate on getting the answers to those questions before you take your next step. Yeah.
And another top mistake that people do, because we're delusional, we're entrepreneurs, we'll go out and start spending money on a website, $5,000 on a website. We'll hire, a high-end, I have a high-end business coach. The guy is a former Green Beret, has a business that was doing 250 million. You don't start out with somebody like that.
Right.
You start out going to like a free mastermind group. Okay. And I have friends I'm in a big mastermind group, and they've been in the group for years. They all have jobs, and they're like, I want to see what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So when I retire, I'll have, and I said, that's great, because you could still write the cost of coming to this mastermind off.
Get those deductions.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. And I think that, so would you be fair to say that the second reason businesses fail is they spend a lot of money on things that either aren't important or aren't important yet? I mean, and of course, there's always the exception to that rule. We talked about Steve Jobs, and I don't know what the number is exactly or recall it specifically, but I think he spent like $100,000 to get a logo for Next, the company he founded when he initially left Apple. And, that's sort of the exception, I guess, that proves the rule. But that's not the first thing you should be spending money on, a logo or a website.
I realize Steve Jobs is in like a whole class by himself, because who does that?
Yeah.
He didn't do any testing, and you know how much money he lost on and that's why he got fired. They were like, the Apple II was like brought in all the cash, and he was doing like the Macintosh and but so Okay, so not by coincidence, the first chapter I talk about is, business clarity, the
Mhm.
3 questions, and then I get into having a budget.
Mhm.
Your person, and nobody wants to do it. You got to look at your personal budget.
Mhm.
How much do you need to live on? And if you're not making it, don't start a business.
Mhm.
At least don't put money into it.
Mhm.
Okay. And you don't have to. That's what the internet has, so many assets, courses, YouTube videos. I mean, you could learn practically anything now,
Mhm.
you know? So we do the personal budget, and that's eye-opening. And then you do a business startup budget.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I didn't know I needed a website. Oh, I got to buy, all these software subscriptions,
Mhm.
because it adds up.
Oh yeah.
So before you start spending money, you got to know, like, where am I?
Mhm.
Again, it goes back to looking at where you are right now, your inventory.
Mhm. And once you've answered those 3 questions, I mean, at least you know that you have a good shot at a business that sells a product or service that either people already want or that solves a problem or a need that they have. And at that point, depending upon what your financial situation is, start spending money strategically on that business. So, what strategic spending would you recommend at that point? We've answered those 3 questions. Okay, we got something as business. We at least have stable personal finances. Where do you start strategically spending money as you start
That
ramping up?
that's one of the easiest questions I think I've ever been asked. You spend money on yourself. You'll never get a higher return than if you invest in self-development, self-improvement.
Mhm.
And I'm not talking about just dollars spending. I'm
Mhm.
talking about taking care of your body, taking care of your mind. I have a girlfriend. She's like a genius when it comes to health. And she said, because I wasn't healthy when I met her 12 years ago.
Mhm.
She said, how are you going to work if you're sick?
Yep.
Like, you got a point there, because, and entrepreneurs, that's another thing we do. We work ourselves into the ground.
Mhm.
Without, I'm in a bunch of masterminds. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of our biggest problems is not taking care of our health.
Mhm.
And then you get sick, and it happens to my coach, former Green Beret.
Mhm.
He's like, you got to be reminded, and that comes down to habits. That's one of my core beliefs. You got to have habits. That's another thing that all of these successful people do. They all had habits.
Mhm.
And Vince Lombardi said, winning is a habit.
Mhm.
Aristotle said that, you are what you repeatedly do.
Mhm.
This isn't a secret. We just don't. I didn't listen to it. I just started exercising like a month and a half ago. Now I'm telling everybody to start walking 6 miles a day.
Mhm. So, I mean, yes, and you talk about budgeting and everything else. That's taking care of yourself financially and making sure you're in good financial shape. You should also be sure that you're in good health and physical shape. But assuming all of those, I guess what I'm talking about is spending money or uh, on uh, on the business itself, not necessarily a logo or a website, but where should your first spend be? Where should you spend your first dollar?
you want to get your messaging down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now this is like on the part of business that they don't teach you in CPA school.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this from a lot of people, a lot of marketing people. If you're not, let's say you know who your avatar is, you know what
Mm-hmm.
your product is, but you're not telling them, they're not hearing you
Mm-hmm.
because you're messing. So like what I was saying is I used to talk about tax codes. It goes in one ear and out the other.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to spend money on anything, is find somebody that's going to help you get your messaging down. I
Mhm.
have one of our executive assistants. She's got a talent for, and she helped me with this, of getting what she calls your signature offer down.
Mhm.
And mine was this $47 a month CFO package.
Mhm.
It took me years to, I was like, oh my God, people get that. Like,
Mhm.
oh, you're going to do all of this and that. Yeah, because it's not in CPA terms. Now,
Mhm.
if my messaging is off, it doesn't matter how much you spent on a website. Before you do your website, have your messaging.
Mhm. Have
Yeah,
your elevator talk. What is it you
yeah,
do, and be able to communicate it. Not, I mean, lawyers go through this as well as, I'm sure, as CPAs. I mean, they're trying to explain these complex terms. I'm a bankruptcy attorney. I often don't necessarily talk about discharging your debt. I'll say wiping out your debt or getting rid of debt. You need to talk in the language of you, and have your message in the language of your potential customer, of your audience, and be able
yeah.
to refine that, like I said, to a 30-second or whatever elevator speech that's simple and easy to understand, so that light bulb goes on over the head of your prospective customer. So get your message and your pitch down would be the next investment, right?
Yeah. And
Okay.
what I learned is they don't care about you. They don't care if you're an
No.
attorney, if you're a doctor.
Mhm.
You could say, if you're in pain from an injury in a car accident, it's like, oh my God, I just got into a car accident. Or I know somebody that just got into a car accident. That's what I learned. It's like you have 3 seconds to get people's attention,
Mhm.
and it's
And they
all
don't care about
focused
you.
on that.
Yeah. They don't
It
care.
used to
The
be,
only
hey, I'm a
person that cares
CPA.
about your cum in college is your mother. I mean, that's it,
You don't even
Uh,
need that to go get a job now. I don't even know if there are jobs anymore, but that's a whole nother story.
right.
But yeah, this is great. I love talking about this stuff.
All right. So we've answered the 3 questions. We've gotten our message down to an elevator speech. So we know, in essence, how we're going to communicate about our product or service. And then, we've talked about avatars, but wouldn't it be fair to say one of the things you should be doing now also is defining who you should be selling this to? One of the
Absolutely. So
one of
I'm
the
sorry,
things
go ahead.
that Jordan Belfort, who is the Wolf of Wall Street in the movie, one of the things he talked about in a documentary was that the mistake most salesmen make is assuming that everybody is a customer, and they aren't. And you need to find out who your customers are and sell to them. So figuring out who your avatar is, figuring out who your customer is, right?
Absolutely. I love that info. I know Jordan Belfort because I don't know him personally, but I have friends and former clients that actually worked for him
Mm-hmm.
before he got in trouble. But yeah, uh, but it's so true. And I tell my team members, I'm like, we're not, especially for our product,
Mm-hmm.
it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's if you don't know how to like download statements, you
Mm-hmm.
either have to find somebody or you can't work with us because you got to download your statements and we're not going to do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So right away, it's like, okay, who can we work with? So I'm doing a Google ad. I'm like, they got to know technology. They got to do this. That I don't want anybody under 35 because they're not responsible. They,
Mm-hmm.
not that they're not responsible. They're not business people.
Right.
And I'm paying for the ads. So I want to narrow it down as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'll never forget that scene where he's like trying to sell him a pen.
Yes, that's
He's,
exactly the
and he's like,
exercise.
what's the other, his partner is like, do you want a pen? He's like, no, I hate pens. Why
Well,
waste the
he was
time?
once asked this video that I'm referring to. he was asked, what's with the sell me this pen thing that you do at the end of the movie? And that's what he talks about. He says a salesman will pick up the pen and try to tell you what a great pen it is, and you've got to buy this pen and everything else, instead of saying, well, how long have you been in the market for a pen? What kind of pen are you looking for? Do you want a fountain pen? Do you want an ink gel pen? Do you want a ballpoint pen? Are you a collector of pens? Get a little bit more information about them and find out. And then armed with that, say, well, then this is the perfect pen for you because it meets all of these requirements that you have. And then you define that person as a customer for that pen.
That's perfect. And you reminded me of another book that I read that's timeless, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Also Napoleon Hill.
That's Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie. But now you're taking an interest in them, and you really want, and if they don't like pen, you don't waste your time with them. We call it qualifying now, right? Mm-hmm. You got to qualify your leads, and we try to do that all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, we target podcasts that talk about business and money, mm-hmm. not crochet, right? Mm-hmm. Although they might be my clients too, I don't know. But
all right, so we've answered the 3 questions. We've gotten our message down, and we know what our avatar is. What's the next investment of time or money that we need to do in order to make sure that we're getting a business that won't fail?
Great question. You need 2 things to have any business that won't fail. You need sales, mm-hmm. and you need cash flow. Mm-hmm. Okay, so sales are going to come by testing, mm-hmm. not your family and friends. You got to put it out there. Mm-hmm. And another thing, and I'm not an advertising guy, but I know you can't say, hey, buy my coaching program for $900, or even you got to, my friend calls it fishing. You got to put the bait out. Mm-hmm. You got to get them to know, like, and trust you. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. You can make it's simple for me now. Mm-hmm. It took years to get that. But that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. I'm like, I can cut years off of people's pain and suffering, mm-hmm. by just saying. And that's when people ask me what we do, I said, I make the financial stuff simple for people. Mm-hmm. I make it, you don't have to be a bookkeeper, but this is what you got to know. Mm-hmm. And this is what you should have been asking me from the, mm-hmm. because they don't know what to ask.
Well, so you're basically, now that we have our message and now that we have our audience, we need to test how to that message with that audience and see what works. And maybe through split testing, A/B testing, you try this message and this wording against this message with this wording and see which one performs better. And a key to that.
Don't do what Steve Jobs did. Don't spend $100,000.
Well,
and I've done that. I've done that with postcards. I'm like, I'll order 10,000 and that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you need to know, and you need to have a way of measuring it, saying, okay, you've sent the message out there. You got to have some sort of call to action, telling them what to do next. They've received your message. Now, what are they supposed to do? And I think there are a lot of times, would you say a mistake that is made is you're sending your message out there to your audience, but you're not telling them what to do. You don't have a call to action, and you don't have a way of tracking it. That's why you could have a tracking number, telephone number, so that people call it, are responding to a particular ad, or a QR code to a particular landing page on a website, where you can measure the response after you've told them what you want them to do.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How long have you been in business?
I opened 21 years. I opened in 2000. Mm-hmm.
So how long did it take you to figure all this out?
It's a journey, not a destination.
Well, yeah.
And it's finding out, in answer to your question, you started out in 2000. I opened my shop just after the area phone book came out. So I wasn't going to get a phone book ad.
What's a phone book?
Well, yeah, that dates me a little bit. So then I got in the phone book, and then I tried that, and I said, and then I had a particularly bad year, and I said, I've got to find something else. So I went to a seminar on attorney websites, and I got a website, and I had a website from the very beginning, but it really wasn't performing at all. So I knew I needed to do something else, and it's a constant. I join mastermind groups. I'm in 2 of them right now. I read their newsletters. I go to their conferences. I read books. It's an ongoing thing, and it never stops. And when you're in business, I mean, like COVID comes along, and we talk about positioning. There's also what's called pivoting. Well, you've had a major change. Your position. You need to readjust your position. A member of my mastermind group owns a chain of 3 martial arts gyms. What do you think he was able to do in the pandemic and everything? So it's a constant ongoing thing where you learn these things and read about them.
And that's another mistake that, and I don't, it's hard to, put these things on a scale. There's big mistakes people make, but then there's the mistake, like you said, it's a journey, because I used to think, once I get my business up to $1 million, then it's like, well, that's not enough. I need it to be 5 million. I've seen this with it's never, that's because we're entrepreneurs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to accept the fact that it's a journey. But I think the point, if anybody's listening to this, and if they're not hearing me say this anyway. That's what kills me when you say, if you're listening to this, but I think the lesson here is that there's steps. There's definite, because when you were talking about that, I'm like, yeah, first you got to do that. Oh, and then you need to have, you got to tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had landing pages and it was just like, oh, click this button. Click here. I'm not telling them why, but, and then you're like, okay, but there's so many moving parts, and then they change too, right? So, that's what I think I would like to make people realize. There's some of the steps you got to do in order. You can't skip them.
And I think it was Dan Kennedy, I believe, who talks about the moving parade of interest. It depends upon where your customer is on their particular journey. They may not be ready to buy yet, but if you get them into your marketing system and able to market to them when they are ready to buy, and maybe you can help them along that parade of interest, when they're ready to buy, they'll contact you. So
one of the smartest guys I know about business gave this example. He had a woman, she knitted dresses as a business. It's like, it takes so long to knit a dress. You got to find another business model.
Right.
And his thing was you're going to knit baby dresses for free. No, maternity dresses for free. And she said, well, why would I do that? I'm already not making any money now. He said, because then you're going to set up a whole thing for babies. You're going to have that, once you have that client, you're going to have that baby for the rest of their life. And then eventually they're going to have to, so you'll have, the toddler clothes, this club, you'll have and you get somebody else to make. But once they become a client, all they're going to remember is, when I was pregnant, they gave me a free dress. My friend calls it the timeline. That's another thing, all these little secrets that people know.
All right, so we've answered the 3 questions. We have our message. We've determined our audience. We've started testing with some advertising to see what works and what doesn't. And obviously with the, what's called the 80-20 rule, the Pareto Principle, we do more of what works and less than what doesn't, I guess is the next step, is paying attention to the information as it comes in and then adjusting your marketing and your business accordingly. But what's the next step after that, or what's the next pitfall people need to avoid?
It's easy to get off track.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to get off track. That's why I mentioned before, you got to establish a set of routines. And the most successful people that I know,
Mm-hmm.
they start off their day with things that have nothing to do with business.
Mm-hmm.
They're praying, they're exercising, they're reading, they're meditating. They're getting their brains and their body in tune with what they're going to do during the day. It's called preparation. And my coach said, you start preparing the day before. That's, I have, my own system, and one of them is to check off tomorrow. Did I check my calendar? Yesterday I looked at my calendar. I said, oh, I got a podcast at 4 o'clock. Or I could have woke up yesterday. This morning saying, what am I doing? I don't even know if I woke up late.
Yeah, I plan my day the evening before. I block out some time at the end of the day to go through, check my emails, go through my files. What do I have to do? And then block out my time for the following day. And I find it increases focus and decreases stress. The day before what you've got to do the next day, and what needs to be done tomorrow and what can wait. And it allows you to be more focused on your business. And I guess you're talking about habits and everything, just developing good business habits. You're by following the steps and avoiding the pitfalls we talked about so far. Hopefully you're in a situation where you're advertising to the right market. You're determining what works and what doesn't. So you're not, I guess one of the pitfalls is continuing to spend on marketing and advertising that doesn't work because that's what everybody else is doing. And maybe they're doing it because that's what everybody else is doing. And you end up losing money on things that just aren't working, and be ready to, cut it off and not do that anymore. Years ago, I got out of the phone book. What's that? I stopped spending money on that because I was tracking it, and I knew that I wasn't getting clients from it. They came in the fall and they said, how about next year? I said, no, thank you. You haven't brought me one new case all year because I've been tracking it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's to find another thing, a pitfall, continuing to spend money on stuff that just doesn't work, and spending money on what does.
Two other mistakes that people make. The self-care is huge. And unless you're talking to other entrepreneurs, like you're in 2 mastermind groups, unless you're talking to other entrepreneurs with intention, in other words, like, don't just not hey, you're friends with a bunch of entrepreneurs. It's like, what's going on with you? I'm like, well, I keep forgetting what day it is. And then you find out, oh my God, I do the same thing, and that, so the self-care thing, but also beating yourself up. Because if you're like me, I'm a solopreneur. I'm not in an office. I have 7 people working for me, but some of them I never even met. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. The virtual assistants and everything else.
I have to go outside to see people. But what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. Oh, so unless you're interacting with people consciously, you're not going to know, because other people see progress that you don't see. Like I started this exercise thing, and people started saying, did you lose weight? I'm like, I think so. So you need other people to, tell you, listen, both ways. Either you're not doing good or you're doing great. But it's more honest. Our what do they call it? Self-talk will bring you down. But you mentioned it. Somebody asked me, how often should I look at my numbers? All the time. All the time. Okay, you don't have to be an accountant. When I say numbers, it's not just your balance sheet and your P&L. It's like, you know what am I spending my money? No, why am I spending my money on this?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I spending my money on? It's, let me look on my return on investment. I never understood that to be. I'm like, return on, yeah, hey, we're spending, yeah, time. That's another mistake people don't make. They don't take their own time into account.
Right.
Put a dollar value on your time. Like, I'm over here doing my own bank recs. I'm a CPA. I should hire somebody to do that because it's costing me $300 an hour for me to do bookkeeping work.
Right.
So all these things, it's overwhelming. It is. It really is.
Well, I guess to wrap things up, when we get to the point that we have, then we probably pass most of the pitfalls that cause businesses to fail fairly quickly. But if you look at the statistics, even 10 years out, a lot of businesses still fail. They may have been doing well initially, but as you say, oh, I've made it. And you just keep doing what you were doing before and not really paying attention. And then things go south on you and you have a problem. So
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, there's a constant vigilance now that you've gotten to the point where you're doing the right things and you've got a business that's working. You have to continue to keep your eye on the ball, continue to do these things and don't slack. Newton may have said objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Well, not necessarily businesses. You don't just, throw the ball and it's just going to keep on going. Eventually gravity is going to pull it to the ground. So you need to continue to put those efforts that we talked about, constantly redefining your message, redefining your market, who your avatar is, constantly evaluating how marketing is working for you, how you might improve your product or service. And that by continuing to do that, you're more likely to succeed and continue to be successful on into the future. So that's it. If anybody wants your help, Joe, or wants to reach out to you, how would they get in contact with you? I can put that in the show notes for the episode.
Okay, so if you're a sole proprietor, I would recommend you go to my website, bedrockbusinessbuilders.com, and you download. I have a free white paper on becoming an LLC versus an S Corp. That's probably the most important thing I have out there. It's free. Or if, I love to invite people to my free mastermind. That's just mastermindwithjoe.com. And
okay.
It is what, you know what a mastermind is. It's valuable. We connect, we have fun, and we support each other.
Are you anywhere on social media or anything like that?
Oh, everywhere. Facebook. I'm on social media platforms I don't even know about.
Well, how can people find you on social media?
Just Google Joe DiChiara. That's all that. I'll come up on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Twitter. Now I'm on Alignable a lot. That's a new one. There's another one called Be Connected I'm on, and we're active in all of these.
All right. Well, we'll get that into the show notes, and those listeners who want more information on Joe and how he can help you can check out those show notes and those links. But good talking to you, Joe. A lot of good information on how to avoid the pitfalls of your business failing, and hopefully you listeners out there will get a lot out of it, and as a result, have a successful business. So enjoy the rest of the week, Joe, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Anytime.